Well, guys, I wanted to do a little review of my 9/11 Iceberg that I released back probably in April in a video about 33 minutes long or so. There's been some criticism. People say, well, how is it an iceberg if it's only 33 minutes? And it was always meant to be a multi part series. And I do plan on doing a part two and potentially a part three of the iceberg at later dates, which would make the entirety of the iceberg around an hour and a half long. Because obviously, with this iceberg that I did, it's missing a lot. But there's also a lot of interesting stuff in here. So I figured I would just go through all of these different topics on September 11th and kind of talk about them and maybe just in I guess a less scripted form than the video. So you start at the top, basically the most known stuff. I would say Building 7 for like normie conspiracy theorists is the number one conspiracy in relation to 9/11. I've talked about Building 7 a few different times. I was going to do a video on it, but the thing is I don't know. I guess it doesn't matter. I can do it, but I'm not sure people can really handle the real stuff with Building 7 because there's so many people that believe, well, this exposes the entire thing. I mean, it's a skyscraper and it gets brought down by, they say debris, they say interior fires. The idea is it's debris from the skyscrapers falling. Specifically, I think that would be the North Tower falling. But Building 7 is interesting. It's not even really a part of it wasn't a part of the World Trade Center complex. You've got Buildings 1 and 2, the Twin Towers. You've got the Marriott, which was Building 3. And then you've got like the 9 to 10 story offices, 4, 5, and 6, and that creates kind of the square design of the complex. And then on the outside of that, I believe to the north, you've got Building 7. But just the idea that, it's this grand conspiracy, they're really going to risk exposing the entire conspiracy to collapse Building 7 5.5 hours after the Twin Towers got collapsed, after the entire area was evacuated. And I understand let's pull it from Larry Silverstein, and that takes some nuance to understand. If you actually watch that interview from 2002, you'll understand what I'm saying. Like, do you really think he's that stupid? The cat's out of the bag. We're gonna pull it, as in, bring the building down. Now, he most likely was talking about the firefighters, like pull the operation to try and save the building. But either way, like the idea that Building 7, I mean, if you're talking about a massive conspiracy to try and force the United States to go to war in the Middle East, why would you wait 5.5 hours to collapse a building that was really outside of the complex? I mean, Building 7's faith would have very likely been the same faith as the Deutsche Bank building. It would have been netted off and then probably demolished in a controlled way because of the amount of damage it sustained from the falling North Tower. So the Building 7 stuff, like, you have to really critically think about it. Is it really worth it if you're doing this massive conspiracy to expose yourself and say, you know what, 5 hours after the Twin Towers collapse, let's just randomly collapse Building 7 with the entire area evacuated, because that's part of the shock value. If you believe the conspiracy, it's, 3,000 Americans dead, that justifies war in the Middle East. Well, one person, I think, died from Building 7's collapse. It might have been 0. It's either 1 or 0. So the Building 7 stuff, you just have to have a little nuance and understanding. The only people that care about Building 7 are the people that want to believe in the 9/11 conspiracy. No normies even know about Building 7. Because Building 7 is not what caused the United States to go to war. It had 0 impact on it at all. It's just a weird thing because it is the only freestanding skyscraper to be brought down by, structural interior fires only and by falling debris. And let's be honest, where else in the world have two 110-story skyscrapers collapsed within 30 minutes of each other? I don't think that's happened anywhere else in the world. So maybe the buildings surrounding it are going to act a little bit weird, but I guess maybe that leads into another conspiracy on how the buildings collapsed in the first place. But you've also got this, and I'm just going to kind of highlight them so people can skip along into the video if you want to go to a different thing. Jet fuel steel beams jet fuel does not melt steel beams, right? Building 7 and jet fuel does not melt steel beams, which is technically true. Jet fuel itself, burning jet fuel, it can't reach a temperature to physically melt steel beams. And of course, it's kind of a red herring, because when people think about that, they say, well, it's like they'll picture the beams still being perfectly intact, like it's a repellent. That's not it at all. It weakens the beams, but it cannot physically melt them, but it weakens their structure. And that's the point. You know, the building's lost structural integrity. And that's where I came out with a video about a few months ago talking about the entire controlled demolition theory and why it's so ridiculous. And really, if you look at the South Tower, you would understand what I'm talking about. And go watch that video if you really think that it was a controlled demolition. The scale of it makes no sense. It's just like the idea that they're gonna plant bombs on the interior of the Twin Towers. What are they planting them in the direct area in which the towers get hit, and then or eyeballing it? It just doesn't make any sense. And then they talk about the downblast effect. That's air trying to escape the building as the building is collapsing. It's not bombs going off. But the jet fuel steel beams, the issue with it is people visualize and they say, man, you've cracked the code. If jet fuel cannot melt the steel beams, it's impossible for the Twin Towers to collapse organically from the jet fuel and from the interior fires. But it's not about the steel beams physically melting. It's about them being weakened. And so that there's a difference there, but people don't visualize that when they hear it. You've also got this Flight 93 shot down. You know, there are the rumors that, well, there were jets scrambled. And I mean, Flight 93, if you understand the timeline, they would have had time to shoot it down. And the way in which Flight 93 crashed and the radius of the debris was extremely extensive. People basically think it was shot down and then the debris rained all over. Because the debris did go on for maybe a few miles. It was like a huge debris field. People were shocked by it. But in terms of it getting shot down, I mean, hypothetically, it just, there's no eyewitness to it. There was a few people. I mean, it was a very rural area. That's another reason why people think it got shot down, because it was like the perfect area to shoot it down. Shanksville, Pennsylvania. But, I mean, there's been no, it wasn't confirmed that it got shot down. I could understand it because Flight 93 was delayed initially. So, but I mean, there's no actual proof that it got shot down. And also it's like, I mean, I guess they would hide that under the idea that, but then it's like, you know, if it's this grand conspiracy with the U.S. government, why would they shoot it down? It doesn't make any sense. The only way I could see them hiding it is, well, they didn't want Americans to know that their own fellow Americans got shot down by the government. But I mean, that's to protect the Capitol. So you'd think it would make sense. I mean, is there really a reason to lie about that? Plus the plane with the altitude, I mean, to shoot it down and then to lie and hope there's no eyewitnesses, that seems pretty risky. So, I mean, and you could understand a massive debris field if the plane is impacting like in a nosedive way at, you know, at a certain speed. And also apparently the wind impacted the debris field, pushing the debris further and further away. You've got bin Laden, kind of self-explanatory. Osama bin Laden, leader of Al-Qaeda, didn't actually plan the attacks per se, but was the leader in the recruitment of the main lead hijacker, Muhammad Atta, and all the other pilot hijackers as well, where they trained. And yeah, so Osama bin Laden did orchestrate this from a cave. I'm joking. He actually did live in a cave for a little bit, but bin Laden was brought and presented the plane's operation, which is what they called 9/11. And then they ended up doing, obviously, bin Laden was very wealthy. Pentagon missile. We know about the Pentagon, the grainy security video. People think it was a missile. There'd be eyewitnesses. It doesn't make sense. The other thing is, it's like, well, if it's this widespread conspiracy, if you're talking about it, wouldn't you target another building outside of the Pentagon? The Pentagon, one person died from that supposed missile. And another thing is, and look, people are not going to believe this because they say it's like doctored or whatever. But even in the people like, well, how is it the Pentagon and there's only one security, you know, CCTV video and it's so grainy? And I agree. I think that's strange. But it's if you look at the video and you upscale it, you can see the point of the plane, and you actually can. I've seen it. People say that's fake, but you can see the point of the plane, and I do agree to it, certainly when it comes to the hijacker being able to fly it directly into the side of the Pentagon with how small of an area that would be to hit, it's surprising. But again, what is what, if it's this massive conspiracy? Why would you target the Pentagon? I mean, I guess is like a landmark, but it's like it's not going to get you many deaths. If you're going for maximum deaths, why would you decide to send a missile into the Pentagon? It just doesn't make any sense. Next, we've got Stairwell A. This is actually supposed to be Stairwell B. This is the surviving stairwell inside the South Tower. And about 12 people survived, being, it's like right on the ground level of the South Tower, an actual stairwell. And you can see after the buildings collapsed, you get the Trident. Some of the Trident stayed standing because they were in the foundation. But then there was actually a stairwell that was the structure of the stairwell. You could see the indent of the steps of the stairwell. Insane, absolutely insane. It's like the one corner of the Marriott surviving. It's like a similar thing to that. August 6th briefing. This was the briefing that George W. Bush got at his ranch in Texas about a potential terrorist attack. I think the title was Bin Laden Determined to Strike in U.S. This had been going on for a while. There was a lot of the government officials, they knew something was going to happen. There was something that was going to happen. And there were a lot of rumors, and that's part of the whole conspiracy thing is, well, you get a briefing on August. I mean, that is pretty insane. August 6th versus September 11th. It's practically a month beforehand. And there was intelligence that they were tracking some of the hijackers, specifically 2 muscle hijackers in the United States, both the FBI and the CIA knew about. But I've even seen reports that they knew all of them were in the United States. Now, to what extent in terms of what they were doing, I mean, you would imagine if they knew they were in the United States and you could track them, when it came to like them being in flight schools, that might be a bit of a red flag. And that's what this is, Florida training. This is they trained mainly in Florida in preparation. The pilot hijackers did for September 11th. And, it was reported that they didn't care about landing the planes. They just cared about how to get the plane up and kind of the navigation and turning, which would make sense if you're talking about a hijacker. Although, isn't that kind of dumb? I mean, you're a Middle Eastern dude. Don't you want to draw as least attention to yourself as possible? I mean, apparently they were just obsessed with like navigation in the air and turning, and they just didn't care at all about landing, which again makes sense. But still, if you're trying to draw zero attention to yourself. Saudi connection. Yeah, there is a Saudi Arabian connection. I wanted to do that in this because everyone talks about Israel, of course, but there definitely was some high-level Saudi people. I mean, people within the Saudi government helping out this operation in terms of it actually happening with Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, who was the architect of September 11th. His nephew, Ramzi Youssef, participated in the Bojangles plot. And Saudi Arabia, no, that was Qatar that actually helped get Muhammad out. But Saudi Arabia had a businessman in San Diego that funded 2 of the hijackers stay in the United States before September 11th. And 15 of the 19 hijackers, they always say, were Saudi Arabian. Although that, if you understand the context, is not all that important because of the belief system of these hijackers. The fact that they were Saudi is not necessarily important, but Saudi Arabia definitely stood to benefit to a degree from U.S. involvement in the Middle East. And the fact that there was a direct, wealthy Saudi businessman that was helping some of the hijackers while they were in the United States, that's like a smoking gun. Nobody knows about it because they only care about the Israel stuff. Magic passport, yeah. I mean, this is an insane story. And look, the thing is, if I try and defend this, I mean, well, so I'm sure many people know that, the planes crash into the buildings. I mean, it was probably the North Tower. I don't know, maybe it was the South Tower, but supposedly one of the passports flew out of the plane, or not out of the plane, but like when the plane crashes, there's a bunch of little parts that go everywhere. The entire plane doesn't just disappear, because that's what people think. And so, I mean, there were paper flying all over the place. It's like the 9/11 snow. And that was from like interior office paper, but it was also plane parts and like little pieces of the plane, like fragments of the plane. But supposedly the passport, one of the hijackers' passports fell onto the ground and somebody picked it up and they were able to recover it before the actual building collapsed. I mean, I would imagine it was probably the North Tower because it gives them more time. But obviously, like, it's extremely rare for that to happen. It's that one's hard to explain, because the other thing is, obviously, if the passport falls and it doesn't get recovered, it's never going to get recovered, because you're going to be dealing with the amount of debris falling from the building, and it's just going to be covered in 10, 20, 30 feet of debris. So that one's a little bit, that's challenging. But I will say there are fragments of plane. It's not like the entire plane just disintegrates. Like people think that's what happens. So it's like there's no way for the passport to survive. Well, no, when a plane crash like that happens, there are things that have to survive. The plane doesn't disappear. Now, I'm not saying it's realistic, the fact that miraculously one of the hijackers' passports was recovered within the time frame before the buildings collapsed, like on the fucking street. That is very shocking. I mean, it is, but I'm just trying to explain it. Stock fund, yeah, that's the amount of put options, which is basically betting a stock will go down, that were placed against the two main airlines involved in the attacks, and it was very inorganic. They knew something was going to happen. Basically, the factor in which the put options were, it's not like it was, oh, they were thinking it was a Friday, and it was insane. Like it was a factor of 100 in terms of the inorganicness of put options against United Airlines and American Airlines stock. So, Atta plane trip. Yes, Muhammad Atta main trip, I should say. Muhammad Atta took a trip to Portland, Maine in a rental car with one of the muscle hijackers, visited a Pizza Hut, as well as a Walmart and an ATM and a gas station the night before September 11th, and then took a connecting flight from Portland, Maine, back to Boston, and then they went on the cross-country flight. That was the flight they hijacked, but he did so in an effort to try and avoid security detection. But apparently he got checked at both airports. It really didn't matter, but obviously he ended up getting by anyways. Larry Silverstein, yes, the multi-billionaire Jewish businessman who bought the World Trade Center complex in July of 2001. It's about 3 months before September 11th is when he closed on the purchase, and he did get terrorism insurance against the buildings. People say, well, that's really suspicious. That in and of itself is not that suspicious, because there was the 93 bombing, which I'm not going to say it was close. I mean, honestly, they did set the bomb off in the basement of the North Tower, and if the support would have gave way, the North Tower might have collapsed, or it could have collapsed on the South Tower, which is what they wanted. So him getting that type of insurance is not shocking. Obviously, the timing of it is pretty ridiculous. And then the story with him and both of his kids not being inside the Twin Towers when they had always been inside the Twin Towers during the week since he had purchased the complex. Yeah, that one's tough. $2.3 trillion, that's the amount that was supposedly missing. The Pentagon reported on it. Donald Rumsfeld, that's kind of blown out of proportion. And it wasn't that they had lost $2.3 trillion. It's that because of the way in which they were accounting their money within the Pentagon, they couldn't locate it. But that figure, people say, well, on September 10th, he said that. Well, that is true, but they had also mentioned that figure before September 10th. It wasn't just like randomly he came out on September 10th and said, guys, we lost $2.5 trillion. Because people think that's what happened. It's not. They were talking about, and that figure was talked about before September 10th, but it was more so, it was like an error to where they didn't lose the money. They just the accounting system was out of date or something. It was something like that. People are like, they over embellished this stuff. Operation Bojanka. I thought it was called the Bojanka plot, but yeah, that was the 93 plot that was tied to the nephew of the architect, it would have been Ramzi Youssef, who in 93 tried to collapse the towers, putting the bomb in the basement of the North Tower. And then 95, they tried the Bojanka plot, and they were found out before they could even begin that the Bojanka plot didn't have anything to do with 9/11 in and of itself. It was more about hijacking airliners and, or not hijacking airliners, planting bombs inside airliners on connecting flights, and then the bombs exploding on the airliners as they were over the Pacific Ocean. It would have been like 15 airliners in total, but they said the Bojanka plot is a 3-stage plot. It included an assassination, it included the planting of bombs, and then also crashing a plane into maybe the Pentagon or maybe the FBI headquarters. So it was like a 3-part thing, and they failed. There was like, they were living in an apartment. Ramzi Youssef was with one of the accomplices, and one of the bombs they were making set off a fire alarm, and the fire department came, and that's how they got found out. They tried fleeing, they got caught, or at least Youssef did. And so pretty insane. 93, 95, and then 2001. But 93 and 95, they were active in terms of trying these to either hijack or plant bombs and blow things up in the United States, or at least, I mean, I guess 95 would have been hijacking a plane and crashing it into the FBI headquarters. Cleveland turn, that's in relation to the Flight 93, the plane that crashed in Pennsylvania, the final plane, the flight in which the passengers fought back against. That turn happened really late. They were very delayed on that in Flight 93. It was a timid hijacker team, and it was also about a 30-minute delay on the tarmac, so it kind of added to their nerves, I'm guessing, and it also helped the passengers gain info that the plane was going to be hijacked and flown into something. So that's why they said, well, we have nothing to lose, let's just try and take the plane back, and then the hijackers torpedoed it into the ground. Or people would say, well, it got shot down because of where, it was a very remote area. Hamburg cell, this is like the main cell in the radicalization process in Hamburg, Germany, that involved 3 out of the 4 pilot hijackers, which would be the main hijackers in the event, like the leaders of each team. And they formed in Hamburg, Germany. And that's basically that. Dancing Israelis, self-explanatory. I've heard some arguments by people, trying to argue against the dancing Israelis. It's just so hard, mainly because of Urban Movers. It's like a shell or moving company. It's like a dead giveaway that it's completely fake and conjured up. And they, the other thing that I'll say is they try and argue, well, they saw the plane get hit. It's just not a normal reaction. You don't immediately celebrate, because think about it. They declassified those photographs of the dancing Israelis, and they're holding up lighters, and that's with just the North Tower on fire. The South Tower hadn't even been hit. It's a very quick reaction. Basically, the thought is that they knew something was going to happen, so they were ready, and then they celebrated. That's what very likely what happened. You don't randomly see that and then say, because you don't even know what's going on at that point. If you don't know something, like if you don't have forethought on something. So that's the issue with the dancing Israelis. Now, obviously, there's a lot more to that. Like, well, how important is it? Who else knew something was going to happen? Why didn't they say anything? Obviously, that all goes into the idea that they wanted U.S. presence in the Middle East and the U.S. to join the fight against terrorism. But, I mean, the dancing Israelis, I've done a video on it. It's a pretty deep rabbit hole, but I mean, it's not just Israel, it's also Saudi Arabia, but you've also got the Jewish art students. The timing of the Jewish art students is the big issue. I did a video recently on it. Whether or not you want to relate it to the dancing Israelis, they're 2 separate things. The Jewish art students was like an espionage tactic by the Israeli government inside U.S. governmental buildings. I'm guessing they were tapping a bunch of the buildings, and they were trying to get floor plans on the buildings. That could be for a number of reasons, but, it happened in 2000 and 2001, and just like Urban Movers, the shell company, the art students, their campaign in the United States where they were trying to go around to government buildings and to big-time politicians and sell art, or U.S. government officials and sell them art, it was basically completely shut down after 9/11. A lot of them had overstay visas. They got deported. So there is that. The Let's Roll, that's a quote from Flight 93 when they attempted to take back the plane. Todd Beamer said "Let's roll," and it got captured, I think, by air traffic control or people that they were talking to on the ground, because that's really the communication in terms of, most of these hijackings. Like the other three planes, a lot of the passengers you really don't know, but if you do know anything about hijackings, normally it's like a ransom. They ask for money, and because they want to survive, so they want to land the plane somewhere, and people just try and cooperate. That plane taking off as late as it did, it gave them the information, the phone calls with the ground that allowed them to say, well, fuck it, the plane's gonna be crashed anyways. Let's try and at least take it over before it happens. And then they just nosedived it into the ground. The Vegas meetings. These were meetings by mainly the pilot hijackers, the lead hijackers of each team, and they happened a few different times. It was mainly thought of as like a last hurrah for the lead hijackers. They would go to Vegas and party, and they had these meetings, but that was just that. Power down, World Trade Center. Yeah, that was a report the weekend, I believe the Saturday. So it would be Saturday this happened, and maybe also Sunday. It was a report by a few workers within the World Trade Center, within the Twin Towers, that they had no power on Saturday and Sunday. And then obviously you have Monday, start of a new work week, they had power, and then Tuesday the buildings both collapse. So just kind of interesting timing. There's a lot of really weird timing. I'm not saying that's in relation to anything, but there was like a long power down event to where the both the Twin Towers, at least from what I've read, did not have power like the weekend before September 11th. Climbing down the tower, that's about a man. That's actually the most viewed video I have. A man trying to scale down the Twin Towers from a side in which it would be possible, because some of the sides, I mean, it depends where you're located, but you're going to run into fire, you're going to run into smoke. But he was trying to scale down the North Tower, which would be the more optimal tower to try and climb down. With the way the Twin Towers worked, they had the like the slit sides, so you can kind of hold put your feet on one of the sides and put your back up against the other side and try and shimmy down that way. And who knows if he would have been. I mean, the problem is he would have had to have broken a window, but the idea is, if you can get low enough to get below the impact zone, you break a window or a window is broken, you could potentially make it down. There is a crazy photograph of him trying to come down, and you can see there is a broken window, but it's on one of the columns directly next to him, which you wouldn't be able to traverse to. And apparently people say, well, he fell off right after the South Tower fell, because people say he was startled, but it might have just been the energy and like the wind that is created by a skyscraper like that collapsing. That's probably why he fell, if I had to guess, honestly. Clean break memo. That's a doctrine, for Israel. It's almost like a greater Israel type doctrine to give themselves a clean break from the Middle East and to have support in the Middle East. And it's basically just like a similar thing to greater Israel in the sense of, Western help to further advance Israeli causes, considering they're surrounded by a bunch of Muslim countries. And it was created with the help and the assistance of a bunch of neocons that ended up being within the Bush administration. The clean break memo, I think, came out in 96 or 97. So people relate that to what happened. I mean, they say, well, there's got to be an excuse for the United States to help Israel in terms of boots on the ground, and the excuse would be 9/11. Elevators. So this is just, I guess, in reference to all of the elevators and the way in which they worked, especially when it came to September 11th, because one of the things you'll get a lot of people saying, well, all the eyewitness people said there were bombs in the building because they heard bombs when the towers got hit or after the towers got hit. A lot of that was what the experts say. It's very likely elevator shafts falling to the base, and it creates massive booms when they do that, because that's what happened to a lot of the elevators. And a lot of the elevators stopped working right when the buildings got hit, and a lot of the elevators did become de facto chimneys for smoke to enter and like go to each floor and to fester on the upper floors as well. But yeah, a lot of the elevators, the shafts with through the shafts, the elevators collapsed all the way to the ground. The No Day film was a film by two brothers. I'm sure many people have seen. It was the best raw video footage you'll get of the North Tower being hit. There's many, many videos of the South Tower getting hit because everyone at that point was focused on the North Tower. But the North Tower, the first one to get hit, there was a routine. There was some documentary about firefighters and checking different things around the streets. And I mean, they were like filming a firefighter, and then the plane is flying ridiculously low, and there's some other crazy video in that film by those brothers. Pretty insane. Epstein paper planes, that's just in relationship to the what was found in Epstein's New York City townhouse. It was the George W. Bush, a painting of him with paper planes and Jenga blocks that had toppled over, and it was thought to be like dark humor, basically. But obviously, all the stuff with Epstein, people are going to think about that more and more. But that was one, because it is a direct reference, and it's like, well, Epstein knows Bush did 9/11, but it's like dark humor. You're going to have that as a inside your townhome. Who really knows? LOL Superman. That's a supposed video. People still don't know if it exists or not. Supposedly, back in the early days of YouTube, it's a graphic video, like the most close-up video of the jumpers, the 9/11 jumpers. The vantage point would have been filming from like the plaza area. And people still wonder, is this a legitimate video? Is it not? Is it just an effect to where people think they saw it, but they actually didn't? And then other people are kind of reinforced with the idea that they saw it because someone else said they saw it. But I will say with YouTube, there is a lot of lost 9/11 video that was removed off of YouTube in 2014 when they went to appease advertisers more, and they had to nuke a lot of content that was deemed not suitable for the advertisers, and a lot of that was the 9/11 stuff. YouTube was a different platform back in the late 2000s when a lot of this stuff would get uploaded and a lot of graphic stuff would get uploaded. Nowadays, it would never fly. You've got the core still standing, so this would be the building core on both the North and the South Tower. Stayed up for about 10 seconds in total, like remnants of the core. It's pretty insane. I remember when I watched the buildings collapse, or I think it was the North Tower collapse, I saw the core, or saw something still. I was shocked by it. Like that was how I realized it, probably like 7 or 8 years ago when I saw it one day, and I was like, what is that? But yeah, there was still a part, like a bigger part of the building, a bigger part of the core that was still standing as the outer walls were already collapsed, which would definitely tell you, it would kind of throw away the controlled demolition theory, because that's where you would plant the bombs, is in the core of the tower. The only thing they could say is, well, they planted them higher up. Well, then that would destroy the theory of, the air pressure being let out of the lower floors of the building, which blows out the windows that people originally thought were bombs, because if they were bombs, those would be planted up against the core of the building. Because if you know the Twin Towers and the floor plan, I mean, all of the support was within the core and the outer perimeter walls. So the fact that the core was still standing on both of the towers kind of throws that theory, out of proportion. You've got Building 6. I did a video on Building 6 a while ago. Building 6 was just like an office building. I mean, if the Twin Towers were still around today, I wonder what the fate of buildings, what would have been 4, 5, and 6. They would have had to have remodeled those. Those things looked ugly. But it's just like it's a horizontal 9-story office building, and there was a massive crater in the center of it, which people found very peculiar. And that was before either, because I did do a video on this, before either of the towers had collapsed. Now, obviously, if there's a massive crater in Building 6, because of how low to the ground it is, it wouldn't be surprising because of the proximity to the Twin Towers. Obviously, things from the towers falling onto Building 6, it wouldn't be surprising, but it was reported that that hole in the building was there before the collapse. So it is very odd, though. Like what is Building 6? It's just like maybe it was misreported. I don't know. Next, you've got the holographics. Really, the conspiracy theory on that. Yeah, it's basically that it was fake. 9/11 was fake. The planes were fake. I guess the planes were holographs. Yeah. No hijackers. Basically the same thing. There were no hijackers. It was the planes were remote controlled. So you've got that. You've got the hell floor. This was a floor inside the North Tower, which makes more sense because the North Tower would have been burning for a longer period of time than the South Tower. The entire floor was completely red. You know, when you look into windows and you see lights on, the entire floor, and this is on one of the higher floors, it's just bright red. Like the entire floor is in flames, and it's a singular floor. It's not like there's 5 floors together. It is a singular floor. All of the windows just bright red. That's the hell floor. And then the gore floor would have been one of the sky lobbies inside the South Tower. A lot of people were within. I mean, that's where people mainly had to kind of gather to go down. And there were a lot of people in one of the upper floors, upper sky lobbies, because that's the easiest way in terms of an elevator straight to the bottom. And the plane impacted, you know, in the sky lobbies of the South Tower as people were going down. So that's what they call the gore floor. So there's like a lot of people in that area, and the plane impacts that area exactly. But you know, the South Tower was different in terms of the impact because it got impacted on its side, and there was actually a stairwell that was still surviving within the South Tower, but it was harder to get down because the South Tower fell extremely quickly. Well, I shouldn't say it was harder to get down, but it was harder to get down in terms of time. There was a lot less time after the South Tower got hit. So that's basically it. I mean, the thing is I had a bunch of topics because I was going to do a part 2, but then I didn't do it because it was like, But I got to find all the topics that I have because what is this? I think this is around 32 or 33 total topics. It's 32 or 33 total topics, and yeah, I would just say I could easily do a part 2. I could do a part 3 easily. There's just so much stuff. There really is. It just takes time. Like, it would probably take me... The thing is, if I actually, you know, put my mind to it, I could probably do it in a week, honestly. I could do it in a week, but I don't know, man. But if I want to do a part 2. But yeah, it does need a part 2. It needs a part 3. It probably needs an hour and a half total for, like, to actually make a good iceberg. I mean, it's obviously an incomplete iceberg. I mean, there's so much stuff. Even some of this stuff that I have on here is like really fringe. Like some of the fringe stuff, like the hell floor is really fringe. The power down thing is pretty fringe. But yeah, that's basically, I mean, there's a lot of weird stuff with 9/11. I agree. But there's going to be weird stuff. It's such an insane event, you know, in the worst ways. So it doesn't really surprise me, but I mean, there are some things that are like really hard to try and explain away. There's other things I can explain away because you just have to, you know, use nuance to it. But yeah, I don't know. Either way, guys, that is going to do it for this video. Make sure you like the video down below. Also follow me on X. Link to that's always in the description.